Well. Welcome to your yoga practice. Like all things, we want to start at the beginning. And for me, the beginning is the breath. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, JB, I've been breathing my whole life. I don't need your help with that. Well, I'm not so sure. We really want to use deep breathing throughout our practice. We want to do it for a couple reasons that I'll get into down the road. But for now, let's just take a quick pop quiz. Don't worry about it. It's low pressure. You're going to self-grade it. Take your hands and I want you to put them on your belly, the upper part of your belly, kind of like the lower ribs. And I want you to sit up tall. So if you're laying down or, just sit up tall. You're in a chair, come away from the back support. Just support yourself. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to start going from like the automatic breathing that you always do to a slower, deeper breath. In fact, I want you to like breathe as slowly as you possibly can, deeply as you possibly can. And I want you to notice what happens to your belly when you inhale. So that's the quiz. I want to know, when you inhale, does your belly kind of push into your hands, sort of downward and out into your hands? Or when you inhale, does your belly kind of draw into your body and upward? Okay. And then typically what will happen is the opposite. Whatever you do on your inhale will happen on your exhale. I really want you to focus on the inhale for this quiz. So go ahead, give it a try. I'll hang out. You can close your eyes. If you're comfortable with that, have your eyelids sort of heavy. If you're on a computer, you could stare at your space bar if you want to keep the eyes open. But again, just 3 deep breaths. And I want you to notice what happens to your belly on your inhale. Now, don't rush this. So if you're still finishing up, that's fine. To take your time. But like I said, typically what happens is one of 2 things. Either you're on your inhale, your belly sort of pushes down and outward. You can feel it into your hands. Or your belly pulls into your body and goes upward. All right, so which one of those happened for you? If when you inhaled, if your belly pulled into your body and lifted up, you're what's called reverse breathing, and you're doing it wrong. All right, now don't take offense to that, please. You'd be surprised at how many people really don't know how to take deep breaths, because it's the diaphragm. It's this key muscle that separates our chest cavity from our abdominal cavity. And I want to show you a little bit of what that looks like. All right, so this gives us an inner view of what's happening in the body. And you can see the bones, right? We can see the ribs, the individual ribs comprising the entire rib cage. We can see the spinal column, the vertebrae. But what I want you to notice is this sort of bluish dome here. This represents the diaphragm. And you can see it separates what's in the chest cavity to what's below in the abdominal cavity. And of course, these red sacs here are the lungs. So when I start the video, you're going to see this diaphragm, this blue dome pushing downward. And this represents that kind of, on an inhale, when the diaphragm pushes downward, it sort of pushes the belly down and out a little bit by displacing it. Have a look. There's the inhale, and then the exhale, it returns back. There's the inhale, and I'll pause it there. So you can see that this dome is now flattened out and pushed downward, and this is the inhale. I'm going to unpause it, and you'll see it's going to return back up toward the heart area, and that's the exhale. So I'll show you one more time as it moves, as the inhale expands the rib cage, pushes downward, and then exhale, it returns. So hopefully this gives you a better idea of what's happening inside of yourself as you visualize the practice when you're doing it, especially if you've been reverse breathing. A lot of times it helps to see like what you're trying to do inside of yourself to make it happen.
So it's also helpful to look at the comparison between inhalation and exhalation from a still photo side by side. So here you see the blue area representing the chest cavity, and there's more space. That's the inhalation. And over here you see the purple image where there's less space, and that's the exhale. On the inhalation, the diaphragm pushes down, the rib cage pushes out. That creates more space in the chest cavity, thereby creating a lower pressure environment. Air comes in to a low pressure environment. That's how the inhalation works. And you can make that easier the more you can expand the chest cavity. Similarly, when you exhale, the diaphragm pulls back up toward the heart, the rib cage comes in. This creates a smaller amount of space in the chest cavity, and the air goes out. So essentially, we're dealing with air pressure when it comes to our breath. You could think about it like an elevator. If you're in a big elevator, there's not a whole lot of pressure to get out of there. In fact, you're like, yeah, more people can come in. Sure. Got plenty of space in here. However, if you're in a really small elevator, then you're like, you can't wait for those doors to get open to get out of there. So small space, high pressure, big space, low pressure. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that some people will call this process belly breathing, because as the diaphragm pushes down, it'll displace the abdominal organs and they'll sort of push out. So it feels like you're breathing into your belly. But technically speaking, you don't have any lungs in your abdominal cavity. You can't breathe into your belly. However, it's a good mental image as you practice this. So although the term belly breathing might not be 100% accurate, it still can be helpful. Now, in terms of benefits for this technique, there are many, but these are the four that I think are really, really crucial. The first one is pain management, and that might sound a little extreme. And in yoga, the idea is not to get to a pain situation. So in fact, your deep conscious breathing can help you sort of navigate that and let you know that, okay, I'm getting a little bit too close to pain. I need to back off here. But there have been times in my life outside of my yoga practice, for instance, getting a root canal when the Novocaine wore off, just using my deep breathing to focus and manage that pain and get through it, to a time where I got in a motorcycle crash in Thailand and I had to take a local bus to get back to my village and then get a ride to the hospital. So while I was on this, pickup truck with a little covering over it and the Thai sun beating down on me midday and, just this throbbing pain, I used my breath and just sat there. That was the only thing that I could do. And it was really, really helpful. Now, a little bit less on that extreme is the discomfort management. And that's where we'll more regularly be utilizing our breath in our physical yoga practice. So many of these positions that you'll be in are new or just plain difficult, and your body will experience some discomfort as it stretches. This is where using your breath and focusing on that rather than a discomfort can really help you manage and be with a pose a little bit longer. So your muscles will start to open up as you can linger, as you can explore. But if the only thing your mind is thinking about is getting out of that discomfort, then you're not going to be there for too long. It also relaxes the body. So there is a physiological effect to deep diaphragmatic breathing that stimulates what's called your parasympathetic nervous system. Not only that, but you oxygenate yourself more fully. So some of the feel-good chemicals in your brain, the dopamine, the serotonin, they start to get released, which also then calms the mind. And even beyond calming the mind in terms of physiological standpoint, I find that it helps me to direct my mind. So I remember when I was younger, laying down to sleep, and my mind would just start jumping on different things, and I would just sort of toss and turn, and um, one thing would lead to the next. So much so that I got to a point where I was like, "How am I even thinking about this?" And so, for fun, because I was up and my mind was active, I would retrace and try to figure out how I got there. So instead, using the sound, using the feeling, using the experience of focusing your mind on the breath can really have a calming effect and help you direct that energy. Another metaphor that I really like deals with something a little bit more simple. In life, there's uncontrollable things. And your breath is also something that's uncontrollable, right? It can just happen regularly. It just happens without your control. Likewise, your breath can be controlled. We've been talking about that. And there are things in your life where you have some effect over. So I've used these sort of stylized islands just to kind of give you this sort of mental metaphor, because when we are on the island of controllable things in our life, there's this sense of contentment. There's a sense, a little bit of peace, and at least there's a efficient use of your mental and physical energy. Whereas when you're on the uncontrollable island, when you're worrying about what someone thinks of you, or you're worrying about outcomes in the future that you really don't have a whole lot of control over, that place can get a little bit difficult and a place of discontentment. Now, the problem is with these two islands, when you're on one, you can't see the other. So sometimes when you're on the island of uncontrollable stuff, you think you're on a controllable island and you can't sort it out. So how I like to think about my breath is like this bridge. So because my breath is uncontrollable, it happens automatically, but it's also controllable. It's sort of this link between these two things in my life. And if I take the time to breathe deeply, it's like stepping out onto this bridge. And when I'm on the bridge, I can finally see both islands and I can realize, oh, this is the one I want to go to. I thought I was on the controllable island. Turns out I wasn't. Let me head over here. So hopefully this visual is a nice metaphor of how you can start to distinguish between the things that you have some control over in your life versus the things that you really don't. All right, now that you have the background and you know how it works and you've heard some reasons why, let's actually get into it.
All right. So now, since we kind of have an idea of what's going on inside of our body, let's get into the practice. Let's actually do it. So whether you were a reverse breather or whether you had your breathing technique down, it still helps to really be able to focus and try to lengthen the depth of our inhales and our exhales. And that's what we're going to work on now. And we're going to work on it in 3 different positions. The first position we'll work on is just lying on our backs. So you want to make sure your head and your neck are well supported, but that can typically work well with the ground. Here I have like a pillow, or it's called a big bolster in yoga. You can even roll up a blanket, and you could put that underneath your knees. All right, so if you have any kind of lower back discomfort, this can sometimes help. Or you can just bend both knees, put your feet flat. But I want you to bring both hands onto your belly. Now, I like to close my eyes here, or at least let my eyelids be nice and heavy and soft. And I'm going to want you to place your hands onto your belly, like not your lower belly necessarily, but right where kind of the ribs end and the belly begins. Because remember, that's where like the diaphragm is going to be pushing towards. So what I want you to do is just relax your belly as much as you can. Like let it out like it's, a couple hours after Thanksgiving meal. And just pause for a second here and try to take a deeper breath than you had been doing automatically. And as you do that, I want you to imagine a balloon in your belly, right underneath your hands. And now what I want you to practice is with every inhale, it's like you're trying to fill up that balloon that's in your belly. So it's going to look like this if you're watching the video. And then as I exhale, the belly is going to fall toward the floor. And go ahead and repeat that. So if you're not laying down, go ahead and do it now. And just try to take as deep and long a slow breath as you possibly can. Inhaling down into your belly, down into your hands. And exhaling, you can let the belly return gently toward the floor, toward your spine. At the end, you can even like pull it up just a little bit, just kind of like you're squeezing out the last little bit of air out of your balloon. So continue that. Try to go for about 4-second inhales and 4-second exhales if you can. That might be a little challenging if you're new to this. If you can go longer, go longer. If you can take a 10-second inhale, 10-second exhale, go for it. Let's do about 2 or 3 more rounds. Slowing everything down, focusing on everything inside of you, nothing outside. For these last 1 or 2, it might be helpful to actually count slowly. See how long your inhale, see how long your exhale can last. And just pause for a moment here and just notice how you feel. Notice how by directing your mental energy toward your breathing process, by deepening the breath, using your diaphragm, there's been any shift, physically, mentally, or even emotionally. Now, another option with this, especially for you reverse breathers out there, if that was hard, and I want everyone to actually even try this, whether you're a reverse breather or not, is actually we're going to do face down breathing. So instead of breathing into our hands, we're going to be breathing into the floor, and we're going to be taking our arms up over our head. And what this is going to try to do is these muscles that have been working for you reverse breathers, if you've been inhaling up, it's going to take those muscles out of the game. So if you've been really relying on those and it's been hard to really train your belly down, train your breathing down, this might help. So just going to lie flat on the ground and create a pillow with your forearms or your hands and relax as best you can. Empty out your entire exhale and begin for about 3 to 5 rounds, breathing down into the belly using your diaphragm on your inhale. And then exhale, let your body fall in. Stay with your own rhythm if you want, or I'll count it out for you. So inhaling for 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhaling for 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhaling. If you can go longer than 4, that's great. You don't have to stay with my pace. And anytime you maybe wander with the mind, just notice it and bring it back. I'll keep going for about 2 or 3 more rounds. But one of the great things about the breath is that if you're focused on it, you're focused on what's happening right now. And so often our mind wants to wander into future events or into past events. And there's nothing wrong with that, but too often we start to mistake those future thoughts, those past reminiscing as reality. And those really aren't real. They're sort of mental constructions. So just by practicing on breathing, even though it might be so simple or basic, it really does start to train you in just, okay, what's happening right now? That's real. And this can be very powerful the more you practice. The ability to recognize when you're in like now mode versus when you're in fantasy land. And again, there's nothing wrong about preparing for the future. There's nothing wrong about learning from the past. It's when we get so caught up in those things that we mistake them for what's actually going on. Or even worse, we miss what's going on right in front of us. All right, let's try it seated now. So I'm going to take a cross-legged seat. It might be helpful to sit on like a pillow or a block or something like that, because oftentimes people's tailbones tuck underneath and they do this. So what you want to do is tilt your shoulders forward, wiggle your tailbone out of the way, and keep it like reaching up and back, and then sit up. So you don't have that round in your back. And oftentimes sitting on a block or something similar can help. Now, once you get yourself situated, kind of wiggle yourself in like you were kind of nesting there in some sand. Sit up nice and tall. So now we're going to try the same thing sitting upright. All right. So now instead of the hands being on the belly, we're going to bring the hands onto the rib cage. Okay. So now we're going to take this into its second part. So we've been focusing on breathing downward on our inhales. Okay. And then letting that return on the exhales. So we're going to continue that idea. We're going to continue breathing downward on our inhale. However, once you can't breathe downward anymore, once you feel like you can't push that diaphragm down any further, then I want you to focus on breathing into your rib cage, out to the left and to the right, backwards and forwards. And we're going to try to feel it into our hands. So that's why I'm bringing my hands on the sides of my ribs. So don't bring them in the front. We were just kind of doing that. You want to walk them back to the side. And if you have tight shoulders, it might be a little bit tricky. Just do your best to get where you can on the sides of the ribs. And you could feel maybe there's a little bit of pressure as you push down. You're going to use that as you exhale. Squeeze out all the breath. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. And then go ahead, inhaling downward first, so into the belly. Can't do that anymore. Start to really push the ribs out as best you can, so pushing into your hands. And then exhale, push the hands into the ribs, start to squeeze it out. And then the belly pulls up and in, diaphragm returns. Continue that process. Inhaling down first, into the ribs second. When you think you can't go anymore, try to sip in a little bit more breath, and then exhale, return. About 3 to 5 more rounds here on your own pace. Down first, out second. But really emphasize that feeling into your hands as the rib cage expands on the inhale and contracts on the exhale. Now I'm breathing in and out of my nose. That might not be possible for everyone, so you can use your mouth and your nose, kind of half and half. I find it's hard to control my breath just by using my mouth, but you're welcome to give that a try. And just start to experiment with this. Essentially, what you're really working on is breathing in these zones. So downward first as you inhale, out second, and then maybe a little bit of lift at the top. But again, pause here for a moment and just notice how you feel. Now your homework is to choose one of those positions, either lying down on your back, on your belly, or sitting upright. and put like your favorite like chill song about hopefully 4 to 5 minutes, and you're just going to put that song on, and you can have that like kind of listen in the background. That's sort of your timer for your 4 to 5 minutes. But the only thing you're focusing on the entire time is really trying to work with your diaphragm and breathe deeply. I want you to notice how you feel before you start and after you're done. But building this practice is something so simple that can have such a profound impact on your life. I mean, for your lifetime. Whether you're waiting for a bus, you get stuck in traffic, maybe you're in math class, you can use this breath to really sort of restore, recharge, and reconnect with what's going on inside.